There's no better hype than that, Phil. So shout out to Phil for getting us started on that. I'm really excited. We have a new series that we're starting. About 2 years ago, around this time, we did a series on the life of David. The life of David. Who was there back then? Raise your hand up high if you were there back then. So we got some people. But we got another character study. We got a new series, a 10-week series on the life of Abraham that I'm really excited to teach about. I honestly think doing character studies from the Bible is the easiest way to change your life. The easiest way to change your life. When you study somebody in the Bible and their character, I think a lot of times if you're anything like me, when you grew up reading the Bible, you hear these stories and you're like amazed by it. But it doesn't really, you don't see how it can apply to you immediately. You see these people as people that are unreachable. You see these people are people that are holy, which they are. But sometimes when we say they're holy, we translate that to mean they made no mistakes, which isn't true. Right? Holiness or saintlyhood is not about not making mistakes. It's about holding on to God in the midst of your mistakes. And that's what we see from a lot of these people. Right? The Bible, it relates to us. It relates to all of us. All the things that you go through in life is found in the Bible. And the cool thing about the Bible is you get to see how God operates throughout human history. You see all these different things that happen through human history, and you can read history textbooks to find that out. That's cool. But the Bible is the only thing you can see, read, find about human history, find about human nature, and then see what God thinks about it. How God intervened throughout time. What God did in certain situations. How God helped people through certain difficulties. That's the beautiful thing about the Bible. The Bible, these people, they went through the same things as us. A lot of these characters, they went through the same things as us. Times where they had money, times when they lost money. Times when they had a home, times when it was hard to find a home. Times when they had food, times when it was hard to find food. They wanted to get married. They wanted to have a family. People, some of them had families, some of them didn't. Some mothers had multiple children, some wives had no children. And it talks about how they dealt with that. It's the same thing though. Today it's the same thing. At simplest terms, we want to have money. We want to be able to survive. Most of us want to get married. Most of us want a family. Most of us want a job. It's the same thing back then. It's the same thing back then. It's also the same mistakes that we make. Back then, they went through the same things as us. We had people that committed adultery. We had people that committed adultery. We had people that murdered. We had people who stole. We had people who lied. Just like us. Right? We talked about David. David is honestly, he's the greatest king of Israel to this day. The greatest king. Right? What he did for that nation is what makes us remember them, like what makes Israel a known nation. He made it the capital politically, culturally, religiously. He made it Jerusalem what it's supposed to be, what we imagine it to be. He did all that. But he's also somebody that slept with somebody's wife. Knowingly. And then got her husband killed. Process that. He slept with someone's wife and then got her husband killed. Raise your hand if you've ever done something like that. Don't raise your hand. This is not the place. But he did that. But then God says something very interesting. He says, this man is a man after my heart. For us, this is really hard to process. We think we have to achieve a certain status to connect to God. We think we have to be a certain level of purity by our own definition to connect to God. But he looked at David, the one who murdered, the one who slept with somebody else's wife, and said, that man's after my heart. We look at Moses. We hear about the cool things that he did. He spread the Red Sea. He led the nation of Israel through. But we don't know what he did before that. He killed somebody. He murdered somebody. That's what he did. And God, knowing that he murdered somebody, told him to come back and free my people. And Moses is very interesting because he grew up in Egypt, but he wasn't cool enough for the Egyptians. The Egyptians knew he was different. He's a Hebrew at heart, by blood, but the Hebrews thought he was different. He had nowhere to fit in. But God still chose him. Not only that, he had a problem with speaking. God still chose him. These are everyday people that can relate to us. Now, you may not have murdered somebody, you may not have slept with somebody's wife, but you've done some things. You know what I'm trying to say. You've done some things that you may even think are unforgivable, but God still chose people through that. Noah, what was his great mistake? He was the only righteous person at the time of the world. You know the story behind Noah and the flood, right? He was the only righteous person. It was him and 8 other people, but they were only associated with him because they're related. But Noah is really the only righteous person. The moment that they overcome the flood, what does he do? He has a little too much to drink. A lot of juice. Drink a lot. To the point where he got too drunk that his kids found him naked. That's who Noah is. Again, you may be thinking about this. That probably hasn't happened to some of us. Maybe some of you guys have been out, had some drinks, had some juice, but you never got to that point. That's Noah. That's what he did. But God still picked him. And so today we're going to talk about somebody who I love. Somebody who I love. The story of Abraham. Abraham's story is it's unbelievable. Like, I love David's story, but Abraham's is unique in its own way. It's unique in its own way. So, let me ask you guys a little trivia. Abraham, Moses, and Noah. Who came first? Who came first, Abraham or Noah? Who came first, Abraham or Noah? Raise your hand for Abraham. Raise your hand for Noah. Very good. Right? So it goes Noah, Abraham, Moses. So let's build up the timeline to see what happened with Abraham. What kind of situation is Abraham born in? What kind of situation is he walking himself into? So prior to Abraham, we know the story of Adam and Eve. They fell, they committed sin, and there was separation from God. Right? There was some brokenness of human nature where they were separate from God. There was a disconnect, right? And everybody that was born after Adam and Eve, there was this continued disconnect. So after Adam and Eve, we have several generations. We know about Cain killing Abel. Then we have Noah. Okay, we have Noah, and we hear about Noah and what he does, building the ark, 8 people being saved, and we hear about the flood. After the flood, something very important happens. Do you guys remember? It's right before Abraham. You guys remember the Tower of Babel, right? Where they were building a tower. They were trying to get up to God. They were very prideful in their thinking. And then God scattered their languages, and that's how we got languages. That's kind of where we were. So there was this huge disconnect between man and God, and it was at this time God was looking for somebody to send. Remember, after the flood, he said, I will no longer flood the earth, right? That was the promise he gave. He no longer sends floods, disasters to correct people, but he sends people to correct people. So now he's looking for Abraham. Now he's looking for an Abraham. He's looking for somebody to correct the people because they're not getting it. They're not understanding it. He's trying to find somebody. And he's looking around and he finds somebody in this land called Ur. Say it with me, Ur. Say it again. Ur. Get used to that. We're going to say it a lot. It's a very interesting word. I don't know if I'm saying it right. Ur. It's a very, and I'm going to talk about it in a second. But he finds some guy in this land called Ur. But this guy, he's an old man. He's an old man. He doesn't have much money. He doesn't have kids. He's not doing well off. What would you call a person like that? Old, no kids, not much money. What do you call someone like that? Do you guys have any friends like that? Any of y'all have friends like that? You know what God said about this man? That's my friend. This old man, no money, doesn't have to get, in our culture, by the way, we frown upon these things. Oh, they don't have money, they don't have a kid. Miskin, I feel so bad for them. Oh, we can't be like that. Like, God, he's so unacceptable. Well, let's not be like that. God, like, please protect us. That's what we say. God said, that's my friend. What does friend mean? Friend means somebody you relate to, right? Well, who are your friends? It's people you relate to, people you can connect with, people you're similar to. God says, that is my friend. While the rest of humanity is looking at her, Miskin, I feel bad for her. God said, that's my friend. Abraham is the father of many nations. We see that. That's what happens. Christ is the father of all nations. But despite being the father of all nations, in this world, they experience a lot of suffering. They experienced a lot of pain. They experienced a lot of sorrow. But that's why Christ said, that's my friend. He called them his friend. Abraham's the first person that showed us that Christ, our God, is a relational God. Abraham believed in God and it was credited to him as righteousness, and he was called God's friend. I don't think there's a better name than that in the Bible. Right? A lot of us, again, in our understanding of God, we have this almost untouchable kind of concept. Like God doesn't understand me, or even if he does, like I'm too scared of him. I'm too fearful of him. Which is good when it's managed correctly. But this shows us God is a relational God. He's a God who created you. Yes, he is your creator. Yes, he's your God. He's your father. To be a father, you have to have some relationship. You have to be a son or daughter. Abraham is showing us that God is relational. That's what he's showing us here. So he's called the friend of God. But he's also called something else. The first in the faith. Friend of God, first in the faith. So he's first in the faith, literally. He's first in the faith. Because before him, there's no Bible, by the way, at this time. There's no book. Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Old Testament. There's nothing to go by. There's absolutely nothing. All he had was God's word. That's it. He had nothing to go by. He's first in the faith in that regard. But he's also first in the faith, meaning the extent of faith that he reached. As we go through this 10-week series, we're going to see the levels of faith that he had. And before I get into that, I want you to know it's not a smooth journey. Just like how I told you earlier, David made mistakes, Moses made mistakes, Noah made mistakes. Abraham's going to make mistakes that's going to make us think pridefully and say, I would never do that. He's going to make a lot of mistakes, but he's also the greatest in faith. Nobody had greater faith than him. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. Even though he did not know where he was going. We're going to talk a lot about that last part, that he did not know where he was going. We'll talk about that. Before he was named Abraham, he had a different name. Do you guys remember what that is? Abram to Abraham. Very similar meanings. Abram means respectable father. And back then, names were a very heavy thing. Like whatever you were named as was your identity. Right? Like they would name you based off kind of your character. Like if you had a certain name, that was reflective of who you were. Abraham means respected father. Even though he didn't have kids, in his community, he was like an elder. He was still somebody respected. But we see his name gets changed to what? Abraham, which means father of nations. He was a respected father, and then he got promoted to father of nations. There's this concept in Matthew 25 that talks about being faithful in a few things, and God will bless you with many things. Being faithful with a few things, and God will bless you with many things. We have a big problem with this, in being faithful in the few things that we have. If you're like a servant in the church or something like that, there's this word that gets commonly used, and it's called burnout. Burnout in service. We hear that a lot. And a lot of that is because, as servants, especially when you start to serve, especially when you try to get closer to God, you want to change the world. You want to do the biggest thing possible. You want to like start a church or something. You want to do something insane. But God is saying, be faithful in the little things. Before you try to serve all these people, have you served your household? Are you faithful to your mother and father? Are you faithful to your brother and sister? This is biblical, by the way. When St. Paul is talking about how to deal as a priest or how to deal as a servant, it says, before you are good with your own household, don't even think about serving the church like that. How could you serve the flock of Christ before you can't even serve the people in your own household? Us, we think so next level. We'll come to church, we'll do all this service, we'll do all these things, but the moment we get home, we're cursing at our brother, we're ignoring our mom, all these kind of things. That's not what God's looking for. Are you faithful with a few things? Are you faithful with your time? Punctuality. Can you even be trusted to be on time? It's very interesting. When we serve, we think we're doing it for somebody else other than God. When you're not on time, you're saying, I'm not on time for God. I'm late, God, like I just wasn't thinking. We don't think of it like that, though. Are you faithful with being on time? It's these things. Think about it through your daily life. Are you faithful with the little things? And see how God blesses you with many things. That's what Abraham's story is about. A man who's faithful with a few things, and God blessed him abundantly and became the father of us all. God loved him so much, he called himself the God of Abraham. You know, like when a dad, he's very proud of his son. He says, that's my son. Like, I'm his dad. Like, it's a very proud moment. Like, he'll tell everybody, you see that? That's my son. That's my son. God on this earth, he said, I am the God of Abraham. He singled him out. I am the God of Abraham. To show how much honor Abraham had before him. You know what's even crazy? He described heaven as being next to Abraham. We all think about what heaven is like. God described heaven as being next to Abraham. In Luke in the Gospel of Luke, we hear the story of Lazarus and the rich man. You guys are familiar with that story, right? Lazarus and the rich man. The rich man, he would see a poor man named Lazarus on this porch. And he's rich. Every time he would leave his house, he would walk past him. He has all this food that he throws away. He could give it to the poor man. He never gave it to him. And at the end of their time, they both died. And it says the rich man went to Hades. Lazarus went to heaven. And where was he? The rich man looked up. He was in the bosom of Abraham. Abraham was holding him, next to him. God is telling this story. He's describing heaven as being next to Abraham. You see how God honors his creation? He described heaven as being next to Abraham. That's what heaven is. That's how much Abraham was honored. But you're going to see, as you keep this in mind, he's not a perfect person. He made a lot of mistakes. And God still said, that's my man. That's my friend. God's plan of redemption begins with Abraham. God's plan of redemption begins with Abraham. Now, Abraham, where is he from? Say it again. Louder. Very good. This is funny to hear you guys say that. He's in Ur. Now, Ur is not a good place. Ur is a place of sin, and I'll tell you about it in a second. But he's in a terrible environment. A lot of people have this false idea of like, if I was in a better environment, like I would do better. Which is very true. It's very true. Environments do matter. But what's more important, the environment or God who works in the environment? Which one's more important? The environment or God who works in the environment? You know, I said this a couple years ago. You know what one of my pet peeves is? A lot of people say, you know, if I was in Ethiopia, my spiritual life would be so much better. You know, when I was in Ethiopia, man, when I was in Eritrea, everything was good. I could hear the Qaddas, hey? You know, everybody tzom. That's the number one point they use. Tzom would be easier. Everybody says that. That's such a very mistaken statement. The same God who works here is the same God who works in America and anywhere else. And that same God who's working in Ur. But sometimes we know we have our weaknesses and our environment may bring us down. But one thing we need to understand through Abraham's story is your environment and your past does not define you. Abraham comes from a place where his father, his mother, his siblings, his cousins, everybody around him, they worshiped the sun god. I think their favorite was the moon god. I don't know what he was like, but they worshiped the moon god. That was their favorite. That's the environment he was in. But his environment did not define him. A lot of us, you know, we get intimidated by when we're around spiritual people. Like when we come to a church setting. Even when we come here, we get intimidated. We see people all wrapped up in their nata. We see people like crossing themselves. We're like, how did they do it? Is it 1 time? 3 times? Somebody did it 3 times today. What am I supposed to do? And they say these things and they get very intimidated and it makes them feel like they don't fit in. It makes them feel like, let me just go back to who I used to hang out with. Friday night, I'm here. I don't fit in here. Let me go back to the club with the people who resemble me. And we start to really talk down upon ourselves. But in God's eyes, we're all just a part of this one ocean. We're all in the ocean. Some of us are floating. Some of us may be sinking. God is trying to save both of us. We're both lost. We're both lost. If you're stranded in the ocean, if somebody's floating, someone's sinking, what's going to happen to the person floating eventually? They're going to sink unless somebody saves them. So stop letting your environment define you. Stop letting your past define you. Don't compare yourself to people who you think to be spiritual, who you think to be righteous, who you think to be doing it right. In God's eyes, we're both lost. And until He saves both of us, there's no hope for us. Okay, so Abraham's in this setting. Where is he? I'm not going to do it all the time. Just wait. Yes, he's in Ur. And now, he gets a call. He has his encounter with God. And God is telling him, I need you to leave. I need you to leave this place. I'm going to take you to a place where the land is flowing with milk and honey, where you will be the father of many. Go to this place. Replace Abraham's name with you. The rest of the 10 weeks, we're going to act like it's your story about you. Put yourself in Abraham's shoes. Who's ready to go on the journey? God just called you. He said, we're going on this journey. Who's ready to go on the journey? I see some hands. Are y'all ready to go on this journey? Y'all ready? Everybody's ready? Okay, the first thing that happens on this journey as they're about to go, Abraham's brother dies. Are you ready to go on the journey? No, God, give me a second. I have to warn him. Give me like a couple of years. Like, not even that. You say, I'm upset with God. I was about to give my life up for God. Now my brother passed away. God, we're done. This is not the relationship I wanted. This is not how I thought you're supposed to work. That's the first thing that happened in Abraham's journey. Who's still trying to go on the journey? Do we still have people on board? We still have people on board? His wife, she couldn't have kids. What is the word we use? Menopause? I should know this since I'm in healthcare. She was basically at that age where she physically, by nature, she couldn't have children. A lot of people, again, this is something that's very terrifying to them. When people find this out about like their wives or whatever down the line, if you've ever encountered some people like this, they lose a lot of hope in a lot of things. Kids mean a lot to people, rightfully so. Imagine Abraham, he's in this position. He knows he can't have kids, at least in his mind. His brother just died. Is he going to go on this journey? Would you go on the journey? Now you start to see the differences between us and Abraham. Abraham, he still goes on the journey. He's at his lowest point, but he still goes on. God appears to you at your lowest because we can't hear him at our highest. I'm going to repeat that for you guys. God appears to you at your lowest because we can't hear him at our highest. When life is good, and everything is going well, when the family's good, our prayer life is good, our church life is good, our relationship is good, our job is good, and we're all high, it's really hard to hear God. It's really hard to hear him because you don't see the need for him. Let's be honest. When things are going well, part of the way we operate is, I don't really need God. That's how our actions look. Look at yourself in your own life spiritually. Were you closer to God at your lowest or your highest? You're closer to him at your lowest. But notice what he says when you're at your lowest. It says he appears, and he appears to you. Because you can't hear him, what's better? For Christ to appear to you? Or for him to just yell at you and you hear him? Would you rather have him face to face or would you rather hear him from a distance? Face to face. And that only happens at your lowest. That only happens at your lowest. Just because of the fall of our nature. It's just our nature. When we get comfortable, we do forget about God. That's the unfortunate reality of the fall. We lose our desperation. Think about it. When something bad happens in your life, you're trying to pray as much as you can. You might take some time off of work. You're looking at how many churches are doing liturgy. You're going to the Ethiopian church, the Coptic church, the Indian church, trying to do all these things, just trying to get to liturgy because you're desperate. But the moment things go well, you don't really feel that desperation anymore. I can come to church a little late today. I can just miss a week today. I don't need to pray tonight. I'm good. We're good. We remember God when we're at our lowest, and that's when he appears to us. And when I say lowest, I'm not talking about you sprained your ankle. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about you caught a cold. I'm talking about your lowest when you lose a job. I'm talking about your lowest when you lose a loved one. I'm talking about when your back's on the corner and you have nowhere else to turn. That's the low I'm talking about. When God appears to you. This is what happened to Abraham. God appeared to him and told him to leave it. He was there with him. After his brother died, after for years he's been crying, praying for a child, and at this point he probably gave up. It's probably not even a prayer anymore to have a child. God appeared to him. And back then, don't think of it like, no, if you couldn't have a child, everybody's looking at you, what's wrong with you guys? There's something off with them. It's a very big shame and disgrace back then. When you're at your lowest, that's when God appears to you. Moses, for example. What's like the famous story of Moses besides the splitting the Red Sea? The burning bush. You guys know what happened? What led up to the burning bush? He killed somebody. He killed somebody and he had to run away. He left the environment he grew up in. He left his family, the people closest to him. He was a fugitive. He had nowhere to stay. You have to imagine what that emotion was like for him. To be by himself wandering. But when he was by himself wandering, think about the thoughts. He's saying, Egypt. I used to eat. I used to drink. I had friends. I had shelter. I had a bed. He's weeping. He's crying. And then the burning bush is there, and God appears to him and says, go back. When you're at your lowest is when God appears to you. There's a story. It could be true. It could be false. I don't know. You guys ever had a bad boss? Like a boss that's like, tells you, like, that's not receptive to feedback, and that tells you what to do. You're like, hey, I was thinking we could, no, you're doing it this way. Can I get some time off? No, if you get time off, you're fired. Like, maybe that's a little exaggeration. That's how they do it at like Amazon, TikTok, I've heard. But this is what I'm talking about, a bad boss like that, that's just not receptive to anything. There's this boss at this one place, and he's working with, he's assigning like tasks, and the workers are giving him feedback. One particular worker is like really trying to get his point across and saying, no, boss, I think it'd be better if we do it this way. No, we're doing it my way. And he's like, okay, just give me a few weeks. I'll come up with a plan. I'll do it your way. No, not a few weeks. Today. Got to get it done today. He's doing these things. And all the workers, they're really stressed out. They're trying to do it. They're trying to be faithful. The boss is just one of those bosses. So one day he goes home, his child's sick. He calls the office and says, can you guys help me out a little bit? Can you do some of my work for me? Like, I'm not going to be able to come to the office. When he's at his lowest, now he's more receptive to hearing God. In this story, we're the boss. We tell God, do this, do this, do this. No, God, I don't want to wait. God, you don't know what you're talking about. God's trying to reason with us. Wait, no, don't you think it's better if you wait? Don't you think it's better? No, God, now. My time. I'm not going to wait. Do it my way. We're the boss in this story. And God is the one who's telling us, just wait, listen, follow me. We just judged ourselves. We say, that's the worst boss. Some of us have said, I've had a boss like that. I hate people like that. That's how we are to God. That's how we are to Him. The beautiful thing is, though, God is patient and He makes excuses for us. Us, we'll go home, we'll talk smack about that boss. We'll say we hate that boss. As soon as the boss closes the door, the co-workers, oh my gosh, I hate him so much. We're saying all these things. But God with us, I understand. They don't know any better. It's okay, they'll come around. The reason we're all here today is because God has been patient with us throughout our whole lives. Saying they'll come around one day. They'll hear my voice one day. He's patient and He makes excuses for us. It's very important that we know both of those things. Us, we can't compromise this. We don't make excuses for people. This is our biggest weaknesses as humans. The moment somebody we have some kind of like issue with does something wrong, we're pounce on them. See, I told you this person was this way. I told you couldn't be trusted. I told you she's like this. That's how we are. God makes excuses for each and every one of us. So now Abraham is getting ready to leave. And it says something very interesting. Who did God appear to, by the way? Who did God appear to and tell him to leave? Who was this person? Abraham, right? It says they left Ur to go to Canaan. Canaan is the promised land. They meaning Abraham, his dad, Lot, and Sarah. Who did God tell to leave? Who did he tell to leave? Abraham brought the whole family. It's kind of like Habashas. When one of us is invited somewhere, we let everybody know, like, come through. But God told just him to come, and we're going to see that this is disobedience, and it bites him. It gets him. He made a mistake by bringing his father. Yes, his own father. He made a big mistake. He made a mistake by bringing his nephew, even Lot. God told Abraham, leave. But he didn't. Can y'all see this? Can you guys see where Ur is? Raise your hand when you find it. Very good. Ur is in the bottom right corner next to Gulf Persique, Persian Gulf is what that means. So Ur is like, basically call it California, like Los Angeles. If you see where it's at, it's by the Persian Gulf. So a lot of boats, a lot of traders, they travel through that way. It's a very booming place. And the fact that it's by water means the agriculture is good. Back then, that's what meant everything for a good land. Is there water nearby? Why? So we can travel and trade, so people can come to us, so our farming is good. He's in Ur. He's in this amazing place. It's a great place. It's like living in like downtown, like Bellevue or something. Like you have your life set, your good 3-story house, that's where you're living. That's how Abraham was living. He was living in Ur. By the way, this is like modern day Iraq. Just for people to like kind of conceptualize, this is modern day Iraq. That's where he is. But like I said, back then, they all worshipped idols. And so God told them to leave this place. And he told them to go where? Where's Canaan? Across. What do you think is the best way to get there? Around the top or directly across? Around the top or directly across? I'm hearing directly across. Raise your hand for directly across. Good, half of the people. Raise your hand for around the top. Congratulations, you're the only ones that would have survived. There's nothing across from Earth to Canaan but dry land. There's no food, there's no water, they're dead if they go that way. So if you guys voted that way, there is nothing left for them. That's the only way they could go. If they went that way, they would have died. So they went around the top to get to Canaan. But they make a couple stops on the way. But before, again, I just want us, I want you to appreciate the beauty in the Bible. Abraham, imagine him. He's packing his stuff. He's getting some food for the road. Him and Sarah are getting ready to go. And people are coming to him saying, Abraham, where are you going? Why are you packing? Where are you going? Where could you be going? Vacation? Business trip? He's like, I don't know where I'm going. He's like, okay, that's weird. Who told you? Why are you leaving? Who told you? God told me. The sun god or the moon god? Neither. They're like, what about your wife? She's old. She can't travel like this. I know. She can't, but God told me to go. What's your plan? I don't know. Now ask yourself, in this situation, are you Abraham or are you the ones asking the questions? Are you Abraham saying, I'm trusting in God, I'm going to do it? Or are you the one asking him questions? It doesn't make sense. What's your plan? Who are you going with? Don't you know your wife's old? You don't even have any kids. Just stay here and die in peace. It makes sense. We're the ones asking questions. My question for you, are you ready to be a fool for Christ? My brothers and sisters, this is the way to the kingdom of heaven. If you are willing to be a fool for Christ, if you don't stick out amongst your group, if people aren't asking you these kind of questions, you become of the world. What does that mean? We always say Christians should not be of the world. By definition, it means you should be different. The things you do need to make people think you're foolish. If you're blending in with everybody, chances are you've become of the world. St. Paul says this, let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you seems to be wise in this age, let him become a fool, that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. If you think you're wise, if you think you're logical, if you think you're smart, forget that. Become a fool. The foolishness of this world, the wisdom of this world is foolishness before God. This means, especially where we're living, we know it's tough to look like a fool. You have to be. You believe God really became man? Yeah. You believe your God died? Yeah. You believe your God cried and had to eat food and got hungry? Yes. You believe your God resurrected? Yes, I do. You tithe, you give 10% of your money to church? Your hard-earned money, you do that? Yes. You love your enemies. You love the people who gossip about you, the people who try to ruin your name? Yes, I do. Somebody slapped you, you gave them the other cheek? Yes, I did. You forgave the person that stole from you? Yes. Us, let's be honest. Most of us here, if our homegirl, our homeboy called us and said this happened, if our friends called us and said, somebody hit me, somebody whatever, all right, where's he at? We gotta go get him. We gotta go find him. We're gonna intervene. Very few of us will look at this and respond in this way that Abraham did. The reason why we think of what Abraham doing as foolish is because our issue is we want to be in control. We want to do the planning. We want to do the planning. God worked with Abraham because he was willing to let God do the planning. Key word here is willing. Did Abraham obey him? We already know he didn't obey him fully. Why? He brought extra people on the trip. But he was willing. God is just looking for somebody that's willing. That's it. Can we get this out of our minds that we have to look a certain way before God will work with us? He's looking for someone from their heart that is willing to give anything up despite their mistakes. God worked with Abraham because he was willing to let God do the planning. All of us in here, you know what we have in common? We're planners. By this age, I want to get married. By this age, I'll have a family. By this age, I'll have a house. By this age, X, Y, and Z. You know the sad truth? God doesn't work well with planners. He doesn't work well with planners. Why? Our plans, they're short-sighted and they're selfish. Our plans are short-sighted and they're selfish. God, he has the whole span of humanity before him. He knows what will happen. He knows how to plan. He sees it all before him. But us, we don't even know what tomorrow holds. We don't even know what's going to happen on our way home. We don't know what's going to happen, but yet we want to do the planning. Not only that, our planning is selfish. When we're planning, we're thinking of only our benefits. God, he does not, when he answers your prayer, by the way, this is another tough pill to swallow. When he answers your prayer, most of the time, it's not because of your sake. He answers your prayer so you can be a blessing for others. God is communal. He's not answering your prayer for you personally. A lot of us, we're like, oh, God answered my prayers. I got this job. It's deeper than that. Yes, you may have answered your prayer for you to get the job, but that's not his end goal. He answered your prayers for that job so you could do his work through that job. So you could be at that company where you're sitting at a table and you know you're the only believer there, so you could be a light to people. When your prayers are answered, it's never just for you. Our plans are selfish. They're short-sighted. It's about me. It's about... That's not how God works. That's not how God works. You know what our thing is? So some of us, we may still be saying, no, that's not me. Like, I trust in God. I have faith. Our faith is like this. We have faith in him, but we need a little hint. Like, we'll trust in him, but give me a hint. Like, when things happen in our life, we like try to connect the dots. Ah, God, I see what you're doing there. You tried to trick me. I see what you're doing. We connect the dots. When we're in some uncomfortable situation, we're like, okay, X, Y, Z, God, I got you. I know what you're doing. We want a hint. Our faith is combined with logic that we learned through school, experience through life. That's not Abraham's faith, though. Abraham, all he had was God's word. He had nothing else. Our thing is we obey by force. Abraham obeyed God by trust. We obey by force and circumstance. When our back's against the corner, when we have nowhere else to turn, fine, God, what do you want from me? Fine, God, where should I go? Abraham just obeyed. We did a previous series on trusting God, unshakable faith. And our brother gave a lot of mathematical equations. Something plus something equals something. I thought I'd come up with the equation. It's very similar to it. Can you see the equation? Can you see the plus and equal? Yeah. Obedience plus faith equals a blessing. Is that one of the equations? I may have copyrighted it. Obedience plus faith equals blessing. If you're missing that feeling of God's presence in your heart, if you're feeling like, God, where are you? If you're feeling like life is hard, and if you're feeling like your heart is growing cold, you need to find that time in your life where you may have missed the obedience part. You may have to backtrack and find that part where you disobeyed God. For example, you guys know the hardest exit in Seattle? It's like when you get off 164 and you're trying to go onto Rainier. You guys know what I'm talking about? Exit 3. You get it. It's like that loop, and you have to immediately switch all the lanes and then try to make it. And if you miss it, you're in Bellevue. Like, that's it. If you miss it, you're in Bellevue. And if you keep going that way, you're in like Issaquah. Like, it's not gonna work. What do you have to do to get back to Seattle? You gotta turn around. It's the same thing with our spiritual lives. If you're not feeling God's presence, you need to go back and find where you missed the obedience. Is it probably the way you treated your girlfriend, your wife, your husband, your boyfriend? If you treated them negatively, maybe that's the time you need to go back and apologize and reconcile. Then you start to hear God's voice again. Is it that time you were unhonest at work? Our culture is very interesting, and I'm talking about American Habesha culture, and maybe it goes back home too. This finesse culture of like, help me out, and I'll help you out. Like, help me with this, help me with that. Like, especially at work. A lot of people, we'll clock in, we'll go home, take a nap, wake up, set an alarm, just to clock out. Maybe you're not feeling God's presence because you're lying and cheating at work. You didn't obey there. And the more you continue down that path, the harder and harder and harder it becomes to feel His presence. Until you turn back around to the point you disobeyed and make right of it. I'll wrap up here. Spoiler alert. This journey takes 25 years to complete. Not because it's that far, but because of Abraham's disobedience. The journey takes 25 years. So Abraham's brother passed away. His wife can't have kids. The journey takes 25 years. You're in Abraham's shoes. Are you still going to go on this journey? Are you still going to go on this journey? We'll see. That's what I'd like to add.
May you hear the words of life to Brother Abel. May you hear the words of life. May you hear the words of life. I'm going to give it a second.